It may be tempting to believe that Doctor Who rumours are a somewhat recent phenomenon. However, Doctor Who rumours have existed for as long as the show itself has. And today we're going to be looking at one of Doctor Who's most insane rumours that seems to actually have had some truth to it. And that being the mystery of the Doctor Who movie starring Johnny Depp.
David Tennant's done it. Matt Smith is doing it. Well, now guess who might become the next Time Lord? Yes, Johnny Depp. He's being linked to a movie version of Doctor Who. According to reports, screenwriter Russell T Davies is planning to pen a Doctor Who film. That's something he's always denied in the past, but if it does happen, then Johnny Depp could well get the call.
Hello everyone and welcome to this video where today we're going to be looking at one of the most prolific Doctor Who rumours in history. But if you do enjoy what I have to say, then be sure to subscribe if you're new. I did a ton of research for this video, so any support would be greatly appreciated. We're trying to get to 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. But with that said, let's dive right in. So the initial reporting for this movie was actually pretty hard to find, and it involved me basically scouring several articles via the Wayback Machine, which in itself is kind of a TARDIS for old websites. And the earliest thing I could find was on the 30th of June 2010 via The Escapist, where it says, rumour, Johnny Depp starring in Doctor Who movie. The TARDIS might be playing host to a very different Captain Jack if rumours of a Doctor Who movie are true. The article goes on to say that a Doctor Who movie is rumoured to be beginning production starring Johnny Depp and being written by none other than, at this point, former Doctor Who showrunner Russell T Davies. The original source for this was apparently a site called Pub Articles, but when I looked for links, I couldn't find any, link that worked to show me this, even on the Wayback Machine. But apparently they were the first people to actually report this story, and specifically the plot details, which you're about to hear. The article quoted Russell T Davies as saying, "Bringing the Who franchise to theatres is a regeneration for the character beyond the usual one. A theatrical release has greater range and can reach millions of more people than just the fans," said Davies. "There will be brand new concepts, and the film will be just as adventurous, scary and humorous as the television programme. But none of us working with the film will forget what makes the character great and interesting, and long-time fans will not be disappointed, because yes, the Daleks will make an appearance." According to Pub Articles, a brief synopsis suggests that the Doctor, along with a small team of volunteers, will travel through time and space, healing the sick of diseases brought by invading aliens. During the course of the movie, the Doctor cures the bubonic plague and then heads to Africa to work on Ebola. This is the apparent plot of this movie, and the only bit of plot I could find with regards to what this movie would have actually been. And it sounds kind of bizarre. Obviously, if we're to believe this as a true quote of Russell T Davies, then the Daleks would have been involved, and as it says, obviously it would have involved the Doctor going around the world and different parts of time to cure diseases throughout history, which, makes the Doctor part of Doctor Who very literal, I suppose. But of course, Pub Articles was basically, just a random, article website from the early 2010s. We need something a bit more reliable to actually confirm the existence of this movie. Well, in fact, the film website Tor actually confirmed that there were industry sources that aligned that this was a thing. There was going to be a Doctor Who movie with Johnny Depp. So it was with even greater surprise that movie studio sources confirmed with Tor.com today that while we can't comment on possible story elements, the casting of Johnny Depp as the Doctor for a 2012 film is confirmed. So there you go, an actual reputable site, or at least what I assume to be a reputable site at the time, confirmed that they had industry sources stating that yes, Johnny Depp was basically all but confirmed to be playing the Doctor in a film adaptation of Doctor Who to be released in 2012. But things would go quiet on the Doctor Who movie front for about another year, until director David Yates would officially come out and say that he was working on a Doctor Who Hollywood feature film. David Yates being the director of the final 4 Harry Potter movies, as well as later going on to direct the Fantastic Beasts movies, which we're going to be coming back to later. David Yates told Variety, quote, "It would take 2 to 3 years to get it right, as the show needs quite a radical transformation. Quote, Russell T Davies and then Stephen Moffat have done their own transformations, which were fantastic, but we have to put that aside and start from scratch. Yates is reported to be working with the head of LA-based BBC Worldwide Productions, Jane Tranter. Interestingly now, the founder and one of the producers of current Doctor Who under Bad Wolf. The project is unlikely to reach cinemas for several years, and as yet there is no script, cast or production in place. So obviously this has changed somewhat from the original vision, which was said to be penned by Russell T Davies, and there was no real kind of suggestion that it was going to be a reboot of sorts. Whereas now you have David Yates, this director of the Harry Potter movies, saying that he was involved, but that it would be a radical transformation away from the Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat iterations of the show that were, at that point, the show was still ongoing. This is 2011, so Series 6 was coming out at this point. And this wasn't like just idle gossip either. The BBC themselves reported on this at the time as well, with a BBC spokesperson even coming out and saying a Doctor Who feature film remains in development with BBC Worldwide Productions in Los Angeles. So it doesn't get much more official than that. A BBC article where a BBC spokesperson says that they were working on this. But then something strange happened. Stephen Moffat came out, who was at the time the current showrunner of Doctor Who, and dismissed the rumours as a weird fantasy. Stephen Moffat told Entertainment Weekly, "There isn't a film. I can assure you definitely that was all nonsense." I'm not going to do his voice. "There isn't a film. I can assure you definitely that was all nonsense. The BBC own Doctor Who, and for the moment I run it for them. I can say that with authority, because as far as the BBC is concerned, I'm the voice of Doctor Who, so if I say it, it's true." He added, "I don't think Yates was ever signed on to do it. I never signed him, so he's not, but I think he's expressed an interest in doing it, and he's a very fine director, and I think he'd certainly be someone that would be on the list for directing such a project. I'm a big fan of his, but the project, as he describes it, would not happen. It was all a bit more off the cuff than it seemed to be." Yates then responded in an article with Bleeding Cool the following March, stating, "Yes, I'm definitely doing a Doctor Who movie," Yates told Bleeding Cool, "but I think where everyone got confused was that we're not making it for 5 years or 6 years. It's a very slow development. I've got projects backed up between now and about 2015, and it's something I'm very passionate about. Stephen's a genius. I love his work. I think he's incredibly clever. I love what he's done with Doctor Who, love his Sherlock Holmes. He's such a gifted man. But this is something that's just a very slow burn, and I'm hoping to sit down with him at some point and have a chat. It's just something that we've been talking about for a little while." Last year, Yates stated that the movie will reboot Doctor Who and not be a continuation of the TV series. However, this time he remained non-committal. "That's all to be discussed," he said, "because it's 5 or 6 years from now. It's weird because what will the series be like in 5 or 6 years? But I'm very excited about it. Very excited about that world." So yeah, obviously, we've seen the progression of this. It started out as a movie that was set to release in 2012, starring Johnny Depp, written by Russell T Davies, that then seemed to evolve with David Yates being attached, but then him saying that it was going to be a complete reboot away from what Stephen Moffat and Russell T Davies had done before him. Stephen Moffat then comes out and says, "No, that's not true." And even in 2019, while promoting Jumanji The Next Level, Karen Gillan came out and confirmed that this was a thing in active talks at the time.
Has there been talk of a Doctor Who movie?
There's always talk of that, and Johnny Depp was going to play the Doctor. This was like a long time ago. But the BBC aren't going to let that happen. No way. They're like, this is our flagship show. No.
Ooh, yeah. You gotta protect it.
So what the hell happened? What happened to the Doctor Who movie starring Johnny Depp? Well, we might have some answers to that thanks to an old article in Doctor Who magazine with Doctor Who magazine editor Tom Spilsbury, where the following facts were revealed. And I have to thank the Reddit user on r/Gallifrey, Jacobus_X, for archiving this, because it's hard to find 7-year-old articles from Doctor Who magazine. David Yates went a bit off message saying he wanted to do a full-on reboot. There was no way that BBC Wales would allow that while the TV show was ongoing. Also, Russell had been forced to return to the UK, so had dropped out of the project, at which point it all fell apart. Russell was in America, where he was overseeing Torchwood Miracle Day. There was a notion to do a Doctor Who movie, but it hadn't progressed far. David Yates had been approached, but Russell's partner got ill in 2011, and without Russell, that project was going nowhere. had Russell still been involved, he'd have worked hard to liaise with BBC Wales and make sure everything fitted in and no toes were trodden on, etc. But David Yates then made his full reboot comments and put BBC Wales' noses out of joint. So it was bye-bye Doctor Who movie. Suffice to say, there's a bit more to it than that, but the moment David Yates went rogue and made his public comments about doing a Doctor Who film without consulting BBC Wales first, he basically doomed the entire project. So now it seems we have a full picture. Initially, rumours were floating about Johnny Depp being cast in a Doctor Who Hollywood movie written by Russell T Davies. This was discussed at some point in time, with David Yates having been attached. But David Yates jumped the gun, attempting to essentially assert that it would be a complete reboot from, at that point, the TV show. Stephen Moffat then came out and objected to this, alongside, presumably, BBC Wales, who weren't going to allow Doctor Who to be rebooted for the big screen whilst the TV show was going on, and was, at that time, still a massive success. While all this was happening, Russell T Davies was working on Miracle Day, but then had to return to the UK after the death of his husband, meaning that an LA-based production of a Doctor Who movie with Jane Tranter and David Yates obviously couldn't go ahead without its writer. That seems to be what happened here, if we're putting all the bits together. But there's a reason why I said to come back to the Fantastic Beasts. Because I'm not the first person to point out that if you watch the Fantastic Beasts movies, and specifically look at the main character of those movies, Newt Scamander, portrayed by Eddie Redmayne, there's a striking similarity to a certain Time Lord from around that time as well. And I have a little bit of a conspiracy theory, I don't know whether this has been confirmed anywhere, that David Yates essentially used the Fantastic Beasts movies to essentially make his Doctor Who movie, but with a different name. In fact, he even cast Johnny Depp as the villain of the second film, The Crimes of Grindelwald, as the titular Grindelwald, until obviously all of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard stuff happened, and then he was recast for the third one. That's a whole mess for another day. But I do think that there's a good chance when the Doctor Who movie fell apart, he basically shifted to the Fantastic Beasts movie instead, and basically used it to make a Doctor Who movie under a different IP. I mean, look, Newt Scamander even has a suitcase that's bigger on the inside as well. But that's just speculation on my end. Would this movie have been any good? I honestly don't know. David Yates, even though, you know, I did kind of say that he seemed to be pushing too hard for a reboot, and that was kind of the reason why this fell apart, is a talented director. And Russell T Davies obviously will have just left Doctor Who at that point, so he will have not necessarily been, like, you know, burnt out or anything by it, and he was working on Miracle Day at the time as well. So I believe that with the right people, a Doctor Who movie could be good. I'm not convinced by two things about it. I'm not convinced by the initial plot synopsis that we read, with the Doctor going around and curing diseases from throughout history. It sounds just a bit random, and a little bit like if you handed the concept of a Doctor Who movie to people who'd never heard of Doctor Who before, and just based on the name and general premise had to come up with a plot. So I'm not a huge fan of the plot that was initially outlined in the initial rumours. And then there's also the casting of Johnny Depp. While I completely understand why industry executives would look at Johnny Depp and go, he's perfect, for me, he's one of those actors that was always suggested, and like, if you have only a cursory knowledge of Doctor Who, may sound like a good fit for the role. But I've always kind of felt that his quirkiness has always felt a little bit too put on, essentially. Don't get me wrong, in certain roles he does a great job, you know, Jack Sparrow and stuff, but then I'm also reminded of roles like him as Willy Wonka in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the 2005 version, where he's just incredibly obnoxious, and he is playing, basically, a child in an adult's body, which you could argue the Doctor also kind of is, and it's incredibly cringeworthy to watch, in my opinion.
I always thought a verruca was a type of wart you got on the bottom of your foot.
And I worry that if Johnny Depp had been the Doctor, then it would have essentially been that, but for an entire Doctor Who movie, and I don't know whether I could have sat through that. There's also the element as well of Johnny Depp not being British, which, to be fair, he can put on a British accent, so maybe you could have got away with it. And to be honest, I'm not so much of a purist when it comes to that. nowadays, but I think in 2011, 2012, that would have been seen as sacrilegious to cast an American as the Doctor. I think there might have been riots in the streets had they done that. But what do you guys think about the proposed Doctor Who movie starring Johnny Depp in 2012? Do you think it would have been any good? Do you think David Yates basically used the Fantastic Beasts as a way to make his Doctor Who movie in all but name? Whatever your thoughts are, drop them down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed researching this video. Any support would be greatly appreciated, and I will see you later.